I'm Beth, and I'm an alcoholic. And I grew up in Danvers in an Irish Catholic family. I'm the oldest of 7. And I know, I had a sense of entitlement from the very beginning. My father was the assistant superintendent at Danvers State Hospital, which made me a doctor's daughter, one of the boss's daughters. So on the 250 acres, many of the employees watched out for me, along with my sisters and brothers, but also, knew who I was. And I also had a sister who was developmentally disabled, and thanks to Archbishop Cushing, who determined that all children like that were exceptional children and were only sent to families who were truly loved by God to have such a special child entrusted to their care. So once again, I was special, part of a special family. So I think there's always been some sense of entitlement. Anyway, I grew up there. There was a lot of drinking in my family, no alcoholism when I was a child. My father had a cocktail when he came home from work. My mother had one as she made dinner together. And whenever aunts, uncles, anybody came to visit, they always were offered a drink or beer or whatever they wanted. Every family occasion, cookouts, birthdays, graduations, baby showers, everything always involved alcohol. But I don't ever remember anybody getting drunk or no fights, no nothing. It was just a part of daily living. I didn't drink at a young age. In high school, once I went on an overnight when I was a senior, and we went to New York City, picked up a friend whose college used a hotel as a dorm, so she had a curfew in the hotel in Manhattan. And we went down to stay with her, and we went out to dinner, and the drinking age in New York was 18. And so the waitress came and asked us what we wanted to drink, and the only drink I could think of, my mother and father had bourbon and water or bourbon and soda, but I didn't like that. The only drink I could think of was a Manhattan, which is what my aunt drank. So I ordered a Manhattan. I didn't realize that it was totally alcohol. And that was fine. We had dinner, and then it was time. I needed to go to the ladies' room. Well, in this restaurant, the ladies' room was in the basement or the lower level, and it was a spiral staircase. And I start to go around the spiral staircase. I don't know if I'm going to make it down here. So that was my one and only drink on that weekend. In college, I did very little drinking. Maybe when I was finally 21, I was a senior in college, and after a rehearsal, I was in the drama club. After a rehearsal, we'd go out for a beer or two, but it wasn't anything. My boyfriend preferred to drive up to Manchester to the bus station and have a cup of coffee and a piece of pie, so I wasn't hanging around with a crowd that drank. When I was 28, I went off to Connecticut to graduate school, and that's where I started to drink like a normal college student would have. We did a lot of drinking in graduate school, but we were all between 26 and 30. I mean, some of them were married, I wasn't, but. And, we had parties and lots of beer. I probably had my first hangovers, in graduate school. Right after graduate school, I got married, and we socialized like young couples, sometimes with excessive alcohol. But it was never, really a problem. Around 1982, we adopted our daughter, Sarah, and we were fine. We went to family gatherings, and, again, the drinking was in control. Around 1993, I lost a job. Well, let me go back a little bit. In 1991, I had surgery, and it brought on a severe depression. And I landed in the Institute for Living in Connecticut, which is a famous psychiatric hospital. And I was there because of the depression, but the only people in the unit I could that I could relate to were the people there for chemical dependency. And we used to play Trivial Pursuits and whatever because they all seemed to be intact. A lot of the other patients were not intact. So anyway, after that, after 91, my drinking did increase. I was drinking every day, and usually a couple of drinks before dinner with my husband. It evolved into sometimes we'd feed Sarah and then we'd have crackers and cheese and more wine and more wine and more wine for dinner until he would stop, but sometimes I didn't stop. But around 93, I lost a job, and that kind of spiraled into a period of unemployment and more drinking. In 94, my husband and I separated, and so Sarah wasn't with me all the time. She stayed with her father because her school was in that district. And so I was free to drink the way I wanted to when she wasn't with me. When she was with me, she was kind of a little watchdog. She had once seen her father. Honest to God, she will tell you today, her father was drunk, he was staggering around the kitchen, and she was frightened to death. Well, I have never seen her father drunk, staggering around any place. He did drink, and he possibly staggered a little bit, but she was 8 or 9, and she took that as a vivid memory. And so when she saw me drinking, she would get very, very concerned and very frightened. So when she was around, I tried to control it. But when she wasn't there, I drank the way I wanted to drink. I told you, in 94 we separated. Later I had to buy a house, which was not a good thing for me, but it had to do with the tax laws, and I had been living in an apartment that I loved, but I had to buy a house, so I bought a house. And it was really more than I could afford. By then I was back working, and I would drink because my job was very stressful. I would drink because my marriage had broken up. I would drink because I was lonely. I was lonely because I wouldn't let any of my colleagues who had become my best friends anywhere near me. You know, I said no to every invitation because I couldn't drink the way I wanted. Or maybe some of these invitations didn't even include drinking. And I certainly didn't want to go any place that didn't include wine or at least a beer. I mean, so life goes on. And in 2010, I sold the house, again, because I couldn't afford to keep it. My daughter was on her own by then. My husband had died by then. My ex-husband had died by then. And my mother was here in Topsfield, and most of my siblings were here, including my developmentally disabled sister, who was second to me in line. So when I go back and look at the pictures, she's always right there. She's always holding my skirt, holding my hand. She was by then in a group home in Wakefield. So I came up to be near my mother, near my sister, near a couple of my brothers who are in this area. And I moved into the same complex that my mother lived in. And that was very lucky, but it was expensive. And I was getting nervous that I couldn't stay there when my mother got really sick. So I stopped looking at other places and started taking care of her. But when I moved there, I had thought, I'm coming back home, back to Massachusetts, where I grew up. And I don't know what I was expecting. Everybody from high school and college and grammar school to have a big party for me and welcome me back to Massachusetts. Didn't happen. And people from Connecticut that wanted to come, I said, no, my apartment's not ready, I can't have you. I had moved from 6 rooms to 3, and I've always been a collector. I had a lot of stuff. So I'm dealing with another loss of having to get rid of my stuff. Anyway, I refused any contact with anybody from Connecticut. I stopped sending Christmas cards. I just began to isolate. And I was angry, I think, that I had to move here. I thought I wanted to, but when I got here, it wasn't all that exciting. I didn't really know anybody anymore. And I was very lonely, but I wouldn't admit that I was lonely. I could only admit that I didn't really want to see these people anymore. I had a new life now, and my new life consisted of visiting my mother every afternoon at 5 o'clock and having a drink of wine with her, and then going home and drinking. It very rarely involved supper. Mostly it was drinking. I'd watch television, I'd read the newspaper, I'd sit on the couch and keep refilling the box of the wine from a box. By then I'm buying the biggest boxes I can, and I'm making lots of trips to the liquor store, various liquor stores. Not because I cared, I really didn't, but where they were cheapest, that's where I was going, or where it was convenient. Anyway, I just kept drinking, and I would sometimes, well, most of the time towards the end. The last year, I was drinking till 4 or 5 in the morning. Then I'd go to bed. I'd get up around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and I wouldn't start drinking again till 5. So I had between 2 and 5 or 3 and 5, depending on the day, to go someplace and do my laundry, to do the grocery shopping. I'd get up earlier if I had to take my mother to the doctor or if I had something specific. I tried to be very reliable, but I don't think I was there, really. Finally, my physical health got the best of me. One day I was in a bookstore in Newburyport, and I was looking in the addiction section. I knew. I wouldn't admit it, but I knew. And I opened this book, and it opened to a page of physical symptoms of alcoholism, and all the little things I'd been noticing, like little pimples that wouldn't heal, and bruises if I even touched my skin to anything, and feelings of faintness, and all the symptoms were right there on the page. I have tried to find that book since, and I cannot. But anyway, I thought, oh, this isn't going too well. I think this is a problem. Well, I went a couple of times with my sister or friends to various places, once to a historic house for a tour, and another time to the Strawberry Festival in Topsfield. And both places, I couldn't make it through the tour. I would get very weak, very dizzy. At the Strawberry Festival on June 13th, 1915, I was there. I started to do the crafts. I had eaten breakfast. I had my water with me. It was a warm day. And I got through maybe 2 craft booths, and I told my friends, I have to go sit down. I'm feeling really weak. So I went and sat down, and after 10 minutes, I didn't feel any better. And the paramedics were there. And I knew the fire captain who was with the paramedics because she'd been to visit my mother several times when my mother fell and broke her hip or this or that. So I went, and she was there, and she took my blood pressure, and she looked at me, and she said, "You're going to Beverly Hospital." So I did. I didn't argue because I really didn't feel well, and I hadn't felt well for a long time. And at Beverly Hospital, when the doctor came in to see me, he asked the routine questions, and I'd answered them before. You know, do you drink? Yes, I drink. How much do you drink? Well, every other time I said, 2, maybe 3 glasses of wine. This time I said, 7, 8, 9 glasses of wine a day. He said, that's almost a bottle, isn't it? I thought, this man does not drink. But anyway, they assessed me for help, and I eventually got it. I ended up detoxing on my own at home because I think I presented as perfectly well together, and I didn't seem to have any symptoms other than this weakness. And so anyway, they sent me home, and due to a snafu of paperwork, it took a week before I got into a Beverly Discovery program and got some help. And the help I got there were people to talk to at least, and there was some group work we did. But I had a counselor that saw me every day, and she started, it was only a 10-day program, but she started on the very first day talking about AA and that I needed to go to AA. Well, I was familiar with AA because my husband had gone, my my niece had gone. My father developed alcoholism when he retired from his job. Interestingly, in my family history, it's definitely in our DNA, but everyone who became an alcoholic at midlife or later. There were no early alcoholism. It was all midlife or later, including me. But I've lost my track of thought. Oh, so anyway, I went to this program. She sent me to AA. I was slightly familiar with the notion of AA. I had no idea. I didn't have any idea of really what the disease entailed. At my mind, when I first came in, it entailed physical symptoms. That was it. I didn't realize that there was a mental, emotional part of this disease. I certainly didn't realize there was any spiritual part of the disease. But looking back, as the big book says, in time things will be revealed. And looking back, one of the things that's been revealed is this developmentally disabled sister I've spoken of. In March of 2013, my mother was about to become very sick. But my sister, Patty, I used to drive her back to the group home on Sundays. She'd come to visit my mother, and then we'd drive back on Sunday afternoon. And we'd get to a particular place in Linfield on Route 62, and she would say, "I miss my daddy." That's my father, who had died at 66. And then she'd say, "I miss Aunt Margaret," and she'd go through the whole list of all the people who had died. And then she'd say to me, "I die too, but not yet." I'd say, "No, not yet." Sometimes she looked at my mother and I, and she said to my mother, who was 94 at the time, "You die next." And then she'd look at me and she'd say, "Then you, then me." "But not yet," she'd say. Well, anyway, on this particular day, it was a Sunday, and she went through that spiel, and she said she was going to die, but not yet. That Wednesday, 2 days before her birthday, which was on St. Patrick's Day, she died in her sleep, very peacefully, but it was quite a shock to all of us. My sisters and I joked that for the first time in many years, for a variety of reasons, we were not having a big blowout St. Patrick's Day birthday party for her. So we joked that she knew we were going to have a rotten party, and so she checked out before that could happen. But it was a big shock. But me, I was too sick to go to her wake or her funeral, which is a big spiritual loss of values. Starting back with Cardinal Cushing, who I'm sure was looking down on me, shaking his finger. Anyway, that's where alcohol brought me. And when I came in here, my very first meeting was in Hamilton, because I had a lot of stereotypes about who I was going to meet in AA. And I chose Hamilton because I figured, this is a stereotype, they're rich in Hamilton, and it'll be a nice meeting. There won't be any roughness. Nobody will be paying attention to me. Then I got scared that there'd be nobody at the meeting in Hamilton. I'd be the only one, or worse, that there'd be one other person and I'd have to talk. Anyway, finally got there, and there were a wide variety of people. There were 8 Harleys in the parking lot, which I did not expect at all. And I love Harleys. I've never been on one, but I was thrilled to see that. And a wide variety of people, many of whom spoke to me that day, asked me how I was and gave me numbers. It was just a really good meeting. And I did what they told me to do, which was 90 meetings in 90 days or more if I could. And I got a job. I started to go to a very small meeting in Middleton at St. Agnes's Church on Friday nights. Please come check us out. We are small, so if you feel like talking some Friday night, come see us. We'll listen. And I got a job there as a coffee maker. I also have a job at the Sunday night Topsfield meeting as a secretary, which was kind of it entails a lot more than I thought it did, like finding speakers, which is not my strong point. But anyway, I'm happy to be in AA, and I'm very grateful to be here, and I feel better than ever. I did keep the rest of the box of wine in the refrigerator for at least 2 weeks or more after I became sober. And one night at the Monday night Danvers meeting, I said, I have a box half full of wine in my refrigerator. I was anxious. I was too anxious to throw it away. Like I was always anxious about, will I have enough wine? Now I was anxious that, what if I really, really need it? And the people at that group said, you've got to throw that away. So I went home that night, threw it in the dumpster, and that was the end. I had never touched it. I just felt like I needed to keep it. Now I'm free. For the first time, and I cannot tell you how many years, I go out after 5 o'clock. I can go to the mall. I can drive. I don't have to worry that something might happen. It never did, but I was always waiting for that time when it would. So I've gotten my freedom, I've gotten my health, and I've gotten a lot of new friends, and I'm just so grateful for AA and for the fellowship of everybody who's been there. Even if you haven't put out your hand to me, I know that I can put my hand out to you and ask, and you'll help. Thank you very much.